Hello and welcome to NPC Next Portable Console. I'm John Voorhees, and I have a couple partners in crime with me today. I've got Federico Viticci over there in Rome, Italy. Hey, Federico.
Hello, coming straight from Europe. You know, the place that everybody loves these days. So
straight from Europe and into your video player of choice. And just up the coast from me, Brendon Bigley in New York.
Hello, New York is beautiful today. It's cold enough that I'm wearing my favorite comfiest sweatshirt that I wasn't really allowed to wear on camera until now, which is great.
Welcome to the Marvel Studios.
Yes.
Sweatshirt. Yeah.
Yes,
So Brendon, I have a question. So I've been watching for the very first time in my life over the past month or so. For the very first time, Friends, the sitcom. Never seen Friends before. Now, there's a lot of New York footage in Friends.
There sure is.
And I just wanted to know, is the first of all, have you seen Friends?
I've seen chunks of it over time. Yeah, I've never watched all of it, but I've seen a bunch of episodes.
Okay, so this group of friends, they always hang out in this coffee place, Central Perk.
Central Perk, yeah.
I assume that's not and never has been a real place.
Oh, but it was.
It was a real place.
What?
Yes.
Really?
And what's funny is it's like recently it became a real place. They opened it up for a couple years. I want to say right before the pandemic happened. It opened up.
I think I saw it when I was in New York in 2018, maybe.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Wow. Okay.
I will also say, Federico, the apartment is a real place as well.
Oh, no way.
And I found it by accident recently because I was going out to dinner with some friends, and we were walking down the street, and there were a billion tourists all taking photos on this totally nondescript block, and we were like, what is happening? Why are people so excited about this block? And then we Googled what is here, because I had not seen Friends in so long. I forgot what that establishing shot of the outside of the apartment looked like, and it turns out it was just the Friends apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was.
It's also in Seinfeld, the diner that they eat in. The outside, that establishing shot of the diner is actually a different diner than when they're inside, which I didn't know until I went to that diner for myself.
It must be awful to live in that apartment building and have to fight through all those tourists every day just to do anything.
Huh.
I'm sure.
Well, I was not expecting this answer. Well, that's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. I will also say, actually, one addendum to this also is in the wake of Central Perk no longer existing, another company started up in Brooklyn called Brooklyn Perk, which has now a bunch of locations and is great. If you're near Brooklyn Perk, I recommend going.
Wow. Okay. All right. And obviously the other fun, nerdy detail that I wanted to mention about Friends. This is a video game podcast. That's where we're going to talk about video games. I just totally thought of this.
Joey played a game on Friends at some point.
Yeah, he probably had a Game Boy.
I mean, I'm sure. I was surprised they did a London episode. I guess, spoilers. Ross gets married. Well, kind of gets married in London at some point. And the series is sort of set in 1996. So that was peak Oasis era.
Yeah.
There was no mention of Oasis. I was very surprised by that. But anyway, we started watching Friends on Max. Mm-hmm. We don't have Max, the streaming service in Italy, but I was using a VPN, and I really I insisted with my girlfriend, we gotta watch it on Max because only on Max they have the 4K, remastered version. But we were running into these issues with the connection, and when it was constantly buffering, and it was not great. And then my girlfriend, after 4 seasons of every couple of episodes, the video would just stop. She was just like, I don't care about your nerdy obsession with 4K. Let's just watch it in 1080p on Netflix. And I was like, no, it's gonna look terrible. I don't want to watch it. Eventually, I had to relent and watch it on Netflix. And she was like, yeah, see, it looks the same. And I'm like, no, it doesn't look the same. I can tell that it's not 4K, but there are times when for your significant other, you just gotta shut up and take it. So I'm watching it in 1080p on Netflix.
Lesson learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway,
are you a person who, now that you've experienced games in 60 frames per second, you can't go back to 30? Are you also one of those people?
Yes, unfortunately. Yep.
That's tough, man.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to
It
hear
is,
that.
I'm not surprised at all. I'm still okay with 30, but I can see the difference, but I'm okay with 30.
I'm
Yeah.
worried about when Federico starts like going into the Nintendo Treehouse chat and like spamming, why is this not 4K and 120 frames per second?
Funnily enough, funnily enough, have you heard that from the what's it called, the game that Nintendo's gonna sell you for $10, the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour?
Yeah.
There's a mini game that asks you to guess the frame rate of
Yes.
what's
Yes, and
I
it
love that.
explains
That's
how
such
it works.
a good idea. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, so those skills will come in handy once I spend $10 to get the Nintendo
I love
Switch
a lot
2.
of the stuff in that. Like the Welcome Tour looks great, actually.
Actually,
And
I agree. Yes.
for $10, like I'm look, it should be a pack-in game. Shout out to Reggie Fils-Aimé, previous Nintendo of America president, who has been like subtweeting Nintendo recently. I don't know if either of you have seen this.
No, I haven't seen that.
He's been reposting videos of interviews where he talked about how he convinced Nintendo of America to add Wii Sports as a pack-in game to the Nintendo Wii.
Right,
and
a
why
much
that was
more
a good decision.
substantial game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, like, the timing implies he's subtweeting Nintendo. Anyway, for $10, I'll buy the Welcome Tour. The other thing that convinced me to buy it when they showed it off on the Treehouse was that game where you can play the entirety of the first level of Super Mario Brothers. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't. I didn't
Okay.
watch that Treehouse.
It's amazing. So they're like the original first level of Super Mario Brothers. If you are pixel accurate on a 4K TV, the whole level fits within a 4K screen. So
wow.
so it starts off as like the original 4:3 aspect ratio, but like really tiny on your 4K TV, and then as you run to the right, it like expands outwards.
Oh, that's incredible.
That's cool.
And if you go down a pipe, it like goes down a little bit, and then they fit the whole 1:1 on the 4K screen by the time you're done with it, and you're like a little Mario trying to run and like see if you can survive.
Oh, that's cool.
So
I like
cool.
that.
I love
Just
it.
more stuff like that. Like that's worth the $10 for me, just for like the weird novelty of experiencing that.
I love
But
it.
the question is, Brendon, will it really cost $10 in America?
I guess
We have-
this is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
this is where we're starting our official first topic, which is not long after we recorded the last episode. Nintendo said, never mind pre-orders of the Nintendo Switch 2 in the United States because of the tariffs that were imposed on basically every country in the world, including some that don't have people on them.
Yeah.
Islands with no people or just penguins.
Just penguins.
Yeah. And so Nintendo, where we stand today, I guess, as we record this, which is Thursday, the 10th of April, because things change by the minute, by the day, is that all those tariffs, including the ones on Japan and the places where Japan, I believe the Switch 2 is being made in Vietnam from what I read online.
Yeah, mostly Vietnam, a little bit of China. Yeah.
Yeah. And that those tariffs that were imposed on those countries are on pause for 90 days. Vietnam, I know, is 46%. I don't know what Japan was. I'm sure it was fairly steep too. But Nintendo has yet to say what they're going to do with the Nintendo Switch 2 for the US. I did see something this morning as we record this that they are going to start stockpiling units in the US. So with this pause, I think they will be able to get some of their production out of at least Vietnam and send them to the United States. But right now, we have no idea yet whether or not, when the pre-orders are actually going to happen in the U.S. They've already happened in other places.
This is one of the benefits of Nintendo having pushed the release of the Switch 2, reportedly, I should say, like, 4 to 6 months. Like, this was supposed to come out at the end of last year, and being able to hold that release, specifically, at least what the Bloomberg reporting said, was to make sure that the launch lineup specifically would like be satisfactory, I think, to people, but also to just increase production and make sure that they can match the demand at launch. So reportedly, there's like anywhere between 6 to 8 million units already like done and ready to be sold, which is pretty solid. Especially if you compare it to, I think, the 5 million units that the original Nintendo Switch sold in its first month. But moving it all around and trying to get it into the United States as quickly as humanly possible for a June release date seems really tough, especially if you're trying to do it before, I think, a lot of these tariffs go into place. It's brutal. It's brutal.
I mean, it's
and
not
the one time from China also, like, what is that tariff now? It's 128%. as
something
of
like that,
yesterday.
125, 128. Yeah, it's not impossible for them to get here. I mean, one thing Apple did, I just was reading about on Reuters this morning, is they moved 600 tons of iPhones to the United States between March and April by air, which is just unbelievable. It
Yeah.
was like these huge air freight planes that landed in the United States. So I don't know. Maybe Nintendo can do the same sort of thing. Maybe they don't have that kind of pull. Who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah, they've got a little time because they've got 90 days, and the launch day is still, a couple of months off. So there's some time to at least stock some things on shelves here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's possible that by the time this episode comes out, we have a better idea of what pre-orders look like in the U.S. At least, pre-orders.
I think there's a good chance. Yeah,
they've opened up pretty much everywhere else around the world. It seems like, but I could see with the 90-day freeze, at least Nintendo feeling like that gives us a pretty good runway to get this out the door. The thing that it impacts more than anything else is it's the thing I've just been thinking about a lot because people are talking about how do the tariffs impact the Switch 2? How do the tariffs impact the Switch 2, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
When that stock is gone, obviously the price is going to have to increase, right? So it'll be like a mad dash to get that first round of inventory, and then the price has to go up in some way, shape, or form if the tariffs stay in place, which they might
just
not.
Just in time for the holidays too. That's what I've been thinking. That's what I've been thinking about a lot of the stockpiling. It's very much a short-term fix for companies like Nintendo, Apple, other electronic companies.
And the thing that I've been thinking about a lot too, specifically, is these will impact everything, right? That's a thing that's worth mentioning is widen the scope out. We're a video game podcast, so obviously we're talking about how it's impacting the Switch 2 right now, but it will impact everything. But even in just the realm of video games, when the PS5 stock is gone from your local Best Buy or whatever, when Sony needs to restock the PS5, they're also going to get hit with tariffs. And if they haven't moved their production outside of China, they're going to get hit with 128% tariff on that. And that's good. You're paying that, dear viewer. That's brutal.
There's no company in the world that can absorb that kind of cost. I mean, I think that there's a lot of wishful thinking happening. I've seen this a lot in the Apple sphere where people are wishfully thinking that the iPhone price won't go up that much if those tariffs are actually imposed on the iPhone. I think it's more likely than not that a significant chunk of it will be passed on to consumers, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see whether it's Nintendo, Sony, Apple, whoever it happens to be. But one other tariff-related story, which is the Retroid Flip 2, which we're going to talk about a little bit more down the list here, is that they are getting those pre-orders out by May 2nd. The thing that we've talked about before, which is the loophole for items under $800, wasn't set to go into effect in China until May 2nd. I haven't heard that has changed at all, despite the fact that the tariffs keep getting announced, as going up. But their plans are to get all of them out by May 2nd, so that if you ordered one in the U.S., the hope is that you'll get it without having to pay any additional cost, because it's already a pretty expensive handheld.
Yeah. And that's if you pre-ordered it specifically.
Yes.
Also.
Yes, I don't know.
You're I want to order one now just in case. You're not going to be in that pre-order batch.
Right.
And just to give you a pre-order update, so obviously I pre-ordered the console itself via my local video game shop, but I was able to pre-order the GameCube controller from the Italian Nintendo store yesterday. It was still available. I was actually hours later to the pre-order, actually I think even a full day later to when the GameCube controller became available in Italy. It was still available on the Nintendo store, so I got that. And on Amazon, Italy, I checked when the pre-orders for the Switch 2 went live. I could pre-order a couple of days ago a Nintendo Switch 2 on Amazon Italy. I did not because I didn't want to get a second Switch 2. But I just checked now. So the Switch 2 pre-orders on Amazon Italy are done for. There's no longer a Switch 2 pre-order, but accessories and games are still available. So as you guys were talking, I just pre-ordered the Hori Piranha Plant camera.
Of course you did.
For 40 euros. I can get the Switch 2 Pro controller, the camera, a bunch of games. But yeah, the console itself is gone on Amazon Italy.
let me ask you this, Federico. When you did the pre-order, was that through the process where you had to register your interest on Nintendo's website?
So
With all the caveats that they had about your history with the Switch?
For the GameCube, you mean for the GameCube?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So no. So I just saw somebody on Blue Sky say that the GameCube controller was out. So I googled Nintendo Store Italy, went to the Nintendo Store page, found the controller, logged in with my account. They sent me a verification code over email, and I just added it to my cart and pre-ordered it. So it seems that for the accessories, you don't have to go through the whole like receive an invitation over email, no. I just logged in, got a code, pasted in the code, and I got the controller. I think it's different for the console.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was wondering, if it was the same for the accessories too.
Yeah. There's a couple of other things that I want to talk about. Obviously the Nintendo Switch 2. There's an interview with Bill Trinan of Nintendo over at IGN. It's a long one. They talk about the price. They talk about the games. Fascinating interview. I don't know if you guys have read it.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. What I found interesting was the idea that it seems like they're really going into the Donkey Kong game from the physics engine perspective. So this idea of like really taking advantage of the classic DK character with this like sort of like slapstick comedy. It's very strong. You can destroy everything. So we might as well embrace the fact that you can destroy anything in the game. And that obviously is a classic Nintendo move of like taking advantage of the power of the console, not necessarily for better graphics. I mean, you can only make Donkey Kong photorealistic so much, but to use that power for something else, which in this case is the gameplay and the destruction of elements around you, which I think is interesting. As obviously is also interesting the open world approach of Mario Kart World. Like it seems they're really going into that game from the perspective of if you want, you can just drive around, and it seems like the knockout tour mode will be interesting. Like in terms of like, you can go from race to race in this like continuous flow, and I think that's gonna be like mixing the battle royale elements almost with a Mario Kart gameplay. I think it's gonna be super fun. So
and we are, at least at the time of this recording, 7 days away from the Mario Kart Tour Direct, or Mario Kart World Direct, which I'm really excited to see more about it, because he was alluding a lot. Bill Trinan ended up kind of being a little bit of like the sacrificial lamb of Nintendo in this case, where there were a lot of people rallying against Nintendo because of the pricing stuff, and they were upset about all the things that they didn't talk about during the Switch 2 Direct. And Bill Trinan was the first one to like give some real meaty interviews and like speak plainly to the press, and answer questions that people had about like the whys of all these things. Like, why is Mario Kart World $80? And his answer, I think a lot of people have said, is like pretty unsatisfactory. It feels like it's in line with exactly what I was expecting them to say, and it feels exactly like what I would say if I was in their position, which is like, we price everything based on how much value we think it deserves. And in the case of Mario Kart World, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about. And he was like, tune in to the Direct on the 17th, and maybe you'll walk away from it feeling like you understand why it's $80. I still think that $80 is too much. I'm worried about the effect that that's going to have on like the pricing landscape for video games as a whole, because a lot of people tend to follow Nintendo. But I can understand what they think they're doing, even if I don't agree personally. You know what I mean?
Yeah, although one thing about that is odd to me is, if that is the case, if there's going to be things in this Direct that are going to wow people and make them feel like it's a better value than they initially thought, why announce the price before the Direct?
Well, because you gotta put the pre-orders up. I think that's why.
Yeah, I guess so. Then they probably should have shown off more in the initial reveal.
Right. Yeah. Or also there, I guess there's a slight strategic angle to people only know the price and they don't know why it's that price. But also there's the bundle for $500 that includes Mario Kart World. True. So you're technically only getting it for $50 and you're saving $30 on it. So like, even if you don't know the reason why it's actually $80, you're still getting $30 off regardless. So that's the one that you obviously buy. Maybe that's the reason. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, maybe. And interestingly, what Nintendo said about that bundle is that once it's gone, it's gone. It's like a one-shot thing, supposedly. I mean,
So
I
annoying.
expect yeah, I expect
find
we'll
that
see it.
so annoying.
I know it's super annoying, but I expect we'll see either it or a different bundle come back down the road, probably for the holiday season. Maybe Donkey Kong is
Yeah.
the bundle deal at Christmas time or something.
Or like Pokemon ZA or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of the value of the Switch, since over the past few days, we got some preliminary analysis from Eurogamer about like what's the actual power of a Nintendo Switch 2. And it seems from their very early analysis after the hands-on that it's basically gonna be a souped up version of a PS4, somewhere in between a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 4 Pro. Like it's slightly better than a PS4, but not quite PS4 Pro level. So it's somewhere in the middle. But I think what's even more impressive is that by and large, it seems like in handheld mode, they're able to pull this off while keeping the TDP of the Nintendo Switch 2 in handheld at 10 watts, which is quite the achievement. And I think when you consider the power of this console, with the fact that it comes with a relatively modern version, it seems, of NVIDIA DLSS tech for upscaling. Again, still not clear on frame generation, but we know for sure they're going to do upscaling. I do think that we're looking at a pretty sweet machine, and which I think is also causing most people wouldn't necessarily expect Nintendo to come out and say, look, we basically have a fancy Steam Deck with NVIDIA tech built in. You don't necessarily expect that from Nintendo. And I think they're going to need, I guess we'll see what's going to happen with the launch of this thing. I think we're going to need a few more directs for the power and the scope of the Switch 2 to really come into effect with people and to the idea that you can play Final Fantasy VII Remake and you can play it in handheld mode and it's gonna look slightly better than a PS4, but it's a Nintendo console. I don't know. It sounds very appealing to me personally.
Yeah, same. And when you consider the fact that, that 10 watts, some of that is going to just powering the device itself, turning it on and lighting up a screen that's bigger than the previous Nintendo Switch screen. So once you account for those things, you've got even less power for the games, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I saw Russ over at Retro Game Core was speculating that it's actually running games closer to 8 watts.
Yep, I saw that too.
Wild to think about.
wild.
Especially I have not messed around with TDP a lot on my handheld gaming PCs until recently. I've started to when I plug the Ally X into the TV, I always bump it up to 30 watt mode just because it can handle it. But even that, it's some games don't run that great at 30 watts even. So it's going to be miraculous what they get that thing to do at 8 watts or 10 watts even. But I think one of the things about the Switch 2 that I've been thinking about a lot, and one of the reasons I think the Steam Deck worked out also long term is when you're just building to one spec like that, and there are dev kits, that Nintendo is sending out to developers and stuff. It's it's iPhone adjacent. It's you can build whatever accessory you want for the iPhone, and it's going to work with all the iPhones. MagSafe is a spec, and as long as you fit that spec, you're good. I think we're going to see some really impressive stuff. I think we've seen a lot of miracle ports on the original Switch. Things like the Witcher 3 port, for example, were wild. And considering what Cyberpunk looks like on the Switch too, that's already a miraculous feat. That game doesn't even run that well on the Steam Deck sometimes. And, that was also considered a miracle port for the Steam Deck. So I think with this level of power, we're going to see some interesting stuff. My long-term question more so is that going to be enough to justify the price? And how soon until people are the Switch 2 isn't powerful enough? I'm already feeling next year even we're going to see, the Z2 Extreme handheld start to launch, and immediately the Switch is going to be left in the dust. That's not going to matter for most people, obviously. But for the people like us and the people who watch and listen to this show, that will matter. And I'm just curious about what that's going to feel like, a year from now. What's that conversation going to sound like?
Yeah. I agree. And the thing is too, that if Nintendo is positioning this as a more powerful machine that's closer to the Steam Deck, maybe they're going to be setting expectations that, maybe the OLED Switch 2 they'll bump up the processing on that instead of just, doing what they did with the original Switch and having the same thing with a different screen. I could see that pressure actually being brought to bear a little bit on the company in ways that it maybe wasn't in the past.
Yeah, or maybe
The
like
new Nintendo Switch 2.
or maybe a couple of years from now, they could do what they wanted to do with the original Switch, which I don't know, maybe imagine that in 2027 or 28, we got a Switch 2 Pro or something.
Yeah.
Like a more powerful version of the Switch 2. Then I don't know, that's a possibility. A few more things about the Switch 2 before we move on to something else, because I do want to talk about the Retroid Flip 2, which I'm not sure if you guys are gonna get or not. Again, it seems like there's chance we'll talk about that in a minute. Deltarune will have mouse mode. Like, we'll have an exclusive mouse mode. I don't know if you have any more details on that, but I think it's potentially an interesting sign of games trying to differentiate on the Switch 2 by saying, and on the Switch 2 we have mouse mode. So
giving you a reason to buy it there instead of on Steam, for instance.
Well, that's my question. So let's bundle this with that Hades 2 beat, which is that Hades 2 is going to launch. It has console exclusivity on the Switch and the Switch 2. It's going to launch on the original Switch also, which I think is nice. But it has console exclusivity with the Nintendo Switch family of consoles. What does that mean anymore? I guess is my question. Outside of it doesn't show up on PlayStation and Xbox, which does count for something. Don't get me wrong, but when they say that Deltarune will have exclusive mouse mode content on Nintendo Switch 2, that doesn't imply to me that stuff won't show up on Steam as well. That means to me, if you are playing Deltarune on a console, it will only have the mouse mode stuff on the Switch 2 because it's the only one that has mouse mode. Does that also mean that they will not have anything that uses this mouse stuff on PC? Like, if you get it on Steam, can you not use the mouse to play Deltarune because they have locked that feature to the Nintendo Switch 2? That's confusing to me. And then similarly with Hades 2 launching as a console exclusive on Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 when it launches, out of early access, like, the big question that's been floating around my head is like, does that really mean that much anymore? In this case, like, I already have Hades 2. It's on the Ally X. I can get it on the Steam Deck. Is that not a console as much as the Nintendo Switch is at this point? Like, to me it is, but just by virtue of this like business brain differentiation of Steam and consoles, it feels like it being on the Nintendo Switch 2 as a console exclusive is like a big thing, where to me I'm like, yeah, man, it's hard. Like, I have it. It's in early access. I've had it for like 8 months. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
What do you guys think about that?
I feel like for a lot of people, I think there's still going to be a lot of people who just don't want to touch PC gaming or Steam at all. I think I have a couple of friends in real life who, like, as soon as the Switch 2 was announced, they were like, hey, so what's the Switch 2 like? Should I pre-order the Switch 2? They don't have a PC. They don't have a Steam account. They just get whatever is available either at GameStop or in the digital store, because they have like a gift card that they buy at the supermarket or something to redeem some games on the Nintendo eShop. So, like, I think there's a lot of people, and maybe it's also like, these are my friends. They're 35 or 36, so they have a job. They don't care about the Steam Deck. They don't have an Ally X. They just buy the console because it's easier. So, or like the other side would be like, maybe you're a parent, you have a young kid, you don't want to give them a PC, you don't want to give them a Steam library. You just buy the console as an object, and you're like, here, take this console. Here's a bunch of games. Here's a gift card. This is all you can play. I think for those people, there's an argument to be made that the simplicity of either a PlayStation or a Nintendo Switch is still important. But I think for people like us, and I think also like people like us is an expanding market. I know that Steam, it's gonna be more flexible, better, it's everywhere, but I wouldn't count out those people that just want to buy a console because it's easier, because they feel like it's a brand, it's safer, whatever. Yeah. I think for me, like, I think I got radicalized by the 8 months of not knowing if the Nintendo Switch 2 was going to be backwards compatible or not, before Nintendo like fully acknowledged that was going to happen, which then
caused me to move all of my third-party game purchasing to Steam. You know, and again, you're totally right. Like, I'm one of those people who's in the know. Like, I'm a person who has a handheld PC. I have multiple handheld PCs in the apartment. I have the means of being able to buy stuff on Steam instead, and I have the know-how. But like, you're totally right that there are a lot of people who just like won't think about anything but the Nintendo Switch. But for like, when people come to me and they ask me like, hey, should I get a Steam Deck or should I get the Switch 2? I'm still going to tell them to get the Switch 2 probably. Like, that's going to be the console that everyone's going to have the most fun with.
Here's how I would put it in different terms that maybe we can all relate to, you know, in a different way. People like us, we have blogs, we publish text on the internet. Stay with me. We like to write in Markdown because it's universal, because it's portable, because we can use whatever text editor we want. The vast majority of the world uses Google Docs, and they don't care because they just go to Google Docs and it works. And it's compatible with Google stuff, and it's free, and it's safe, and they know Google Docs. They use Google Docs. And this is how I think of like the divide between us, the elite, who have our Steam libraries, and it's cross-platform, and we have a bunch of PC handhelds, versus the people who just want to buy the console and the console games.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting analogy. I think you're probably right. I mean, that is, you know, there. It's. I thought you were going with Microsoft Word instead
Or
of
that.
Google Docs.
Yes, I mean they are interchangeable. I feel like Google Docs is maybe a little more popular, although Word.
I think it probably is.
People
these
like
days,
it more than Word. I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right, Federico. I mean, I think that there is something to the simplicity of the Switch. There's something that you can actually go to a store and buy, which you can't do with the Steam Deck. And while I look at the Hades 2 exclusive and think, well, okay, I mean, it's exclusive, but I've had it for like the last 7 or 8 months, and I'll have it, you know, the minute that it comes out of early access too. So it doesn't mean as much to us. And I think too, with, you know, something like you know, mouse mode being an exclusive feature, I do think that that's going to come to PC versions as regular old mouse mode, you know, using a regular old mouse with a PC as opposed to turning your Joy-Con sideways. So I would be very surprised if we don't see mouse mode being incorporated into PC games too.
Yeah, it would be wild if Nintendo was like, part of the exclusivity deal is you cannot let people use mouse and keyboard in the PC version of this video game. That would be like the most
people would go out of their minds when they get Deltarune.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, you can only get Switch 2 mouse mode on a Switch 2, so problem solved. I mean,
that's the thing. They're being very technical.
Yeah, is it a Logitech mouse? No, it's not. It's a Switch 2 mouse. Therefore, it's exclusive, right? I mean,
it does make you wonder though what happens when the games like Deltarune eventually go to the PlayStation. You know, I mean, I can't imagine that mouse mode is going to be something that's necessary to the gameplay. It might be a nice add-on, but I don't think I can't imagine that they're going to lock themselves into just PC and Switch.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to mention about the Switch 2 is that what are they called? The game key cards. Thankfully, they will not be console or account locked.
This story drives me up a wall, Federico. This is one of those things where this did not need to be a controversy. Like, this is one of those things where all Nintendo needed to do was like speak plainly to people as if they're people, and they wouldn't have had a problem. But because they were so cagey about what game key cards were from the beginning, they just like said that they exist but didn't explain how they worked at all. Everyone rightfully assumed the worst, right? Like immediately, because hey, we live in a capitalist society. Nintendo is one of the biggest video game companies that exists. It behooves them to try and make as much money as possible. And if they're being cagey about how something works, it probably means they're being greedy about it. Realistically, and they have a history and they have a history of locking things down in a way that makes using their games harder. Yes. And then it was like literally like a day later, somebody did some reporting and was like, hey, this is not your worst nightmare about how game key cards work. That's not how they work. Don't worry about it. But at that point, the story had already snowballed into this misinformation campaign, not even a campaign, but just like this snowball of misinformation that was just being spread around the internet. I mean, even on this very show last week, I said that Mario Kart World's physical edition was going to be $90. That was not true. That was not true. I retract that. That ended up not being true. But like, that's the kind of misinformation that comes out when you're not being upfront with people. The thing I'm fired up about this because I literally just made a video about this yesterday. So like, I'm like thinking about it a lot. But like, all Nintendo needs to do is not consider themselves to be standing on a mountaintop dictating to the people below them what they should be thinking about something. You need to express your facts plainly to people and make sure they understand, or else you're not providing them with a reasonable reason to go out and buy your stuff. Like that's at the end of the day, like it's all messaging, and Nintendo, at least around the Switch 2 for the most part, outside of why it's great, has not been good at messaging why things aren't great, why some things are not, you know, I would say like the standard. Anything that they're trying to like change about how the business works has been withheld, I think, from people. And that's why Bill Trinan needs to go and give, you know, an 8-hour interview with IGN to like clear stuff up.
And they lose control of the messaging, as you said, because I mean, I was hearing the 90-day thing about Mario Kart still this week. I mean, it's out there, and a lot of people believe that that's the case.
Yeah.
Still, as much as you know, they fumbled the messaging a little bit. It was not as bad as the Xbox One marketing.
Nothing will ever be that bad.
Not so. That's the low threshold, and you know, it's better than that. Thankfully,
Phil Spencer's still giving interviews in 2025 being like, we really messed that up.
Yes.
Which is true.
Yeah, that was a fun time. Before we go, we should talk about the Retroid Pocket Flip 2.
Yeah,
we should.
Early previews and hands-on videos and articles are out. I have watched a couple. I can say after watching these videos that I am so incredibly pumped for this handheld. It was already sitting at the like my 2025 Switch 2 Pocket Flip 2, and I think watching these videos sort of cemented that opinion that I had. I think it looks great. I feel like they have made the right adjustments in terms of the hardware compared to the original Flip. In terms of like, you know, it's a little bit more flush compared to the old one with the weird sort of bumps in the back. The screen looks great. The sticks look very nice. The performance is right there. I mean, it's running the Snapdragon 865. I'm really looking forward to this one in a way
it's more portable than the Retroid Pocket 5 because it's just narrower. I mean, I think it's going to be kind of the ideal when it comes to a pocketable device like this.
Yeah. Now remind me,
this is a dream handheld, I think, in a lot of ways.
Brendon, did you pre-order one?
I did not. No. I want to. I would like to get one, but I was really concerned that they wouldn't ship in time for me to get one before I left for my trip. So I leave the first week of May, and realistically, they're going to start hitting like last week of April, first or second week of May in the US at least, which is like, that was kind of what I was anticipating when the pre-orders went up when they did, just looking at the past of how quickly Retroid is able to turn around pre-orders to shipping. But I don't know, maybe I get one delivered to the apartment I'm staying in Tokyo. Like maybe I leave here with 2 handhelds and I come back with 4.
And maybe you come back from Japan with a Switch 2 for me, Brendon.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come back with 5. 2 Nintendo Switch 2s and a Retroid Pocket Flip 2. Yeah.
Yes.
This is
one for every day of the week.
This is where you're gonna get stopped at customs. Be like, sir, we believe you are a smuggler of
you're a Nintendo Switch mule, is what you are.
I'm so interested, and like not fun interested, but like anxious interested in if they're gonna make me pay the tariff coming back from Japan with the Switch 2.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is a good point.
They're gonna be like, did you purchase anything big while you were there? And I'll be like, I sure did.
Maybe, and this is gonna suck, but maybe you shouldn't bring back the box.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, you unpack it and it's like, I bought it before I left. But the problem is they know when you left and they know when things ship. If they know,
Will they know it's a Nintendo Switch 2?
Well, all I have to do is not talk about this live on a podcast that's
Right,
going
that's
to
a
go
good
out on
idea.
the internet publicly, and
That
then
is
I'll
a
be
good
fine.
idea. That is a
Yeah,
good idea.
don't plan this privately.
I mean, this
Not on a
is all
podcast.
hypothetical. Brendon is going nowhere. What trip to Japan? There's no trip
What
to
trip?
Japan.
No.
Brendon is staying in New York, the city where they recorded Friends, the TV show. So, shout out to
He'll be
Friends.
drinking a coffee at Central Perk and playing his original
Yeah,
Switch.
man, there's no trip, no Japan, no trip. So I think that about does it for this week's episode. We are gonna talk about Zelda notes in NPC XL, which you can get, dear listener, if you want to support us, if you want to get even more NPC, you can just go to our Patreon and you can sign up at $5 per month. And you're going to get a whole other episode of NPC where, me, John, and Brendon right now, we're sitting on our desks and on our computers. We're going to keep recording. We're going to keep talking about something else that only our Patreon members can get. So that's NPC XL. We're going to talk about Zelda notes and apparently GPS for Zelda games. That's a thing that now exists or will exist shortly. Thank you. And John, where can people find the rest of the NPC stuff that we do?
Well, of course, you can find us all over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You have Brendon Bigley over there. Brendon is at wavelinks.online. You also have me and Federico. We're over at macstories.net, and all three of us are all over the social medias. Just look for our names there, and you'll find us. So that's it for this week, folks. We'll talk to you in another week. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.